In this video, we're going to focus in on numeric variables. So I have the little template set up here again. This one I just changed the heading a little bit to try numeric variables, since that's what we're going to be doing. Once again, I have our function try values. One variable in there that's coded in with the alert doesn't do anything right now, obviously, because there are no values. So let's go ahead and create a couple of other variables for ourselves. And now we can start working on some expressions. I just want you to note that when you're using math, just our sort of normal mathematical operators in JavaScript, they function just exactly like they would in regular math. So if you did something like, that, you will in fact get the answer to that question, just as you did, just like normal, where it's going to do perform the multiplication first and then the addition. And actually, that's how the order of operations would go anyway. So let's switch these out so you can see what this would be. And you'll see that that is in fact the correct answer for doing the addition first and then the multiplication by 15. You can have negative numbers. That's not a problem at all. All right, so that's no issue. And you can, no matter how fancy your expression here for x, it's gonna get that down to the single literal value, and then you can use x in any other context where you normally would. Now, it will also be governed by those mathematical rules. So I'm explicitly defining y as 0 here. Remember when we first hit that button before I had put anything in Z in the other video, and it said undefined. So when you first initialize a variable, when you first declare a variable, it does not have any value in it at all. It doesn't have 0, it doesn't have anything in there, because that would be presupposing a type onto it, right? That would be presupposing it as numeric when it might be a string variable for all the computer knows. So it simply says, okay, yeah, I know what that is, but it leaves it completely undefined. So even if you want to have a value of 0, you do have to explicitly define that value as 0. Now, let me just note, if you do something like this, x divided by y, since obviously you cannot divide things by 0, that is just a principle of math that you ought to know, that is going to be a thing that's going to get you a very interesting error message from the computer where it says it's negative infinity. As we mentioned last time, you can't you can't use string variables with numeric variables in expressions, with the exception of the plus sign. That'll just stick things together. But if you try to use subtraction, multiplication, division, that's not going to work. Oh, by the way, so just if we did this, just to show you the division working properly, right? We'll get our negative number that we were expecting. It was negative 120 before. We divided by 10, so it should be negative 12. That's correct. Okay, so so numeric values can function, again, very much like math. You may be wondering to yourself, why would I ever want to do math this way when I could just pull out my calculator? Okay, great question. But sometimes in programs, you do definitely need to perform arithmetic on different values that you're getting from other places, and you'll see as we continue on with our coding. But I do want to talk to you for a minute about the math object, with a capital M. Remember, that is case sensitive. And the math object can take a bunch of methods, and those methods are indicated with the dot. You may recognize that convention back from our CSS when we would make our custom classes. We would use a dot, and then we would assign the class. It works a little bit differently in JavaScript, where the dot then says, okay, here's the end of the object and the start of the method. So in this case, I'm going to tell you about a method called random. And math random is how you is the syntax for this method of the math object, and you can assign variables to be randomized. So this is the key. Math random is the key to random number generation in JavaScript, and there's a randomizer pretty much every compiled program you would ever work with. Randomizers are super important in coding. They allow us to do a whole lot of things and add a lot of interesting functionality. And you'll see that a little bit later on. And so this is the one in JavaScript. And notice it doesn't take any parameters. It does need those parentheses, though, to finish out the syntax. And I'm going to go ahead and just assign Z with our randomizer, our random number generator. And I just want to show you what this does. Now notice, it might take a little minute there. And when I go ahead and keep saying OK, it's going back and finding another random number. Now, you probably are noticing that this number is always between 0 and 1. So in other words, it's a decimal value less than 1. It is a positive value. Of course, you can multiply that by -1 if you need negative random numbers. But that's how all randomizers are defined in compiled languages. They're always these just numbers between 0 and 1. It's randomly. And again, it's not actual random, but it's definitely close enough to random compared to humans, okay? So there's our randomizer. This is a little bit more typically how we would use a randomizer. So if Z is math, well, actually, let's retask X to that. So let's go ahead and make X our math random. And then we can say Y is equal to whatever our maximum value is. So let's say we wanted a random number between 0 and 10. When computers count, they always count from 0. They don't count from 1, they count from 0. So you always have to keep that in mind. When we're making arrays later, keep that in mind. Anytime you're doing anything with values, just remember that computers count from 0. So you may be wondering, if I just have this decimal, then how is this randomizer any good to me? Well, you do need to do a little bit of math in order to accomplish that. So let's go ahead and make our Y X times 10. So that's going to take our randomized decimal and multiply it by 10, which will give us random numbers between 0 and 10. So let's go ahead and see. So let's go ahead and test that and see what kind of values now we're getting. All right, so that one is 3 something, 3 something a little bit less. That one would be 1 essentially. 2 something, right? So we are getting our random numbers, and our random numbers are coming between 0 and 10, as we'd hoped. But if we really wanted integer values, that's usually what you mean when you say, give me a number between 0 and 10, right? You usually are thinking integer values, not these crazy decimal places. So how do we do that? Well, we can use another piece of the math object, another method from the math object to accomplish that goal. So in this case, we're going to use the round method, and round actually takes a parameter, which would be the number that you want rounded. So in this case, it's Y. So I'm going to send Y as a parameter, and the return, the thing that this method is going to return, is Y rounded to the nearest integer, using our normal rounding rules where, 0.5 goes up, less than 0.5 rounds down. Remember to change your alert to Z now that we've added Z into the equation here. And go ahead and reload that. And now we see we're getting integer values between 0 and 10, which is what we wanted. And they're going to come up in just a sort of random order. And now, super easy, right? What if we decided we wanted to, have that be 0 to 100? We don't have to redo anything else. We just need to change this one element here, and our numbers will fall within the new range that we have, all right? So that's pretty cool, and hopefully you can start to see and imagine some uses for this. And if you can't, like I said, don't worry, we're going to be using this in another program. So that gives you a sense of assigning some numeric values, using those numeric values in expressions, using variables in those expressions, and we introduced 2 elements of the math object, random and round. This one does not need a parameter, this one does. And if you want to see more about the math methods, you can use the link that's included on the course website.